What's happening, Airsofters? Welcome to the channel and welcome to episode 2 of our VSR-10 build series. Today we're going to be talking about the S-Trigger. This one is version 9.1, which is the latest version at the time of this video. We're also going to be talking about their Springer Custom Works piston for the VSR-10, obviously, which comes with, or you have a choice of buying, spring guide rod. Normally when we select a trigger system for our VSR-10 builds, our go-to is usually the Action Army 90-degree triggers. They come with pistons in the kit, so you get a piston and the trigger system, which is very good. We thought that was brilliant at the time, but this time we thought we'd go for something a little bit more special, since this is going to be our first airsoft rifle build series. So this time we selected the S-Trigger. This one's version 9.1, as we said, which is made by Springer Custom Works. Go check out their website if you're interested. At the time of this video, the S-Trigger 9.1 costs 129 euros, which is about 150 US dollars, give or take. As soon as you see the trigger, you instantly know that it's made from quality materials. You can see the steel on the side there. The materials used are absolutely amazing. And you can see that not only is it beautiful, it is made to last. This is version 9.1, which means it has gone through quite a few revamps over the years. One thing we really like about the design of this is the way the mounting sections are slightly recessed in there to follow the contour of the receiver. If we just lightly press this trigger unit up against an Action Army receiver, you can see that it fits perfectly. Everything about it is very snug. And what this does is remove wobble when you install it. Rather than having a flat surface on a rounded surface and then put the screws in, meaning the trigger system can wobble left or right, the trigger system is actually placed in very snugly with the two raised sections, or the recessed mounting section. This sear here is the piston sear, a 90-degree version to go with 90-degree pistons. And although the material they've used is incredibly hard wearing, it's a very, very high-grade steel, they've also heat treated it as well, just to make sure that is absolutely as robust as it can be. This ensures that you will have less breakages when you're using the trigger system with high-end builds. One very noticeable difference between the Action Army triggers and this S-Trigger is that it retains the safety feature. Many of you will know that if you chose to upgrade your trigger to the Action Army one, you lost the ability to use a safety. Custom Springer Works has incorporated this into their design and made sure you get the best of both worlds, as you get to select whether you keep the safety feature or not. On the original safety lever, you can see that there's this big notch here which kind of protrudes upwards. Sometimes when you're installing a scope on your VSR-10 with low mounts, the eye bell on the rear could be about here, which means whenever you cock the bolt back, your thumb will come past this part here, and sometimes you'll engage the safety lever there by accident, or just scrape your thumb along the top of it. So Maple Leaf have designed this low profile safety lever, which, as you can see, will sit much lower than the original one. For anyone using a scope with a large eye bell, this is a godsend. But as you can see, if you install the Maple Leaf safety arm on the S-Trigger, it is misaligned. It really needs to be in the center there, which means this will not fit. So what you have to do is grind down this part here, or at least reduce the size of it so it fits inside. We no longer have the tools to do that, so currently we're going to be going with the original safety lever. The trigger does come with a warning telling you to use all the mounting hardware that they have included, which you should do anyway. As you can see, the mounting hardware they've included is of very high quality and beautiful at the same time. One thing we would like to add is if you are installing your safety arm on your S-Trigger and you have to use the spring located just here, you might have to cut that spring down ever so slightly because it might be too strong. We had no problem installing it like this, but just to be safe, we'd cut this spring down a tiny little bit just so that the spring's not so stiff. Another major difference between the Action Army trigger is that the spring guide stopper there protrudes downwards and it is kind of loose. Now this isn't a problem, but when you install an aftermarket trigger guard, say the PDI Remington type trigger guard, you have to cut a reset into the actual trigger guard to allow for that protrusion. On the S-Trigger, however, nothing protrudes, so it's completely flat. There's also a hex screw here, which stops the spring guide stopper moving downwards. If you were to try and remove the trigger whilst it was installed and everything is put together on your rifle, you can do so by undoing that screw there and then pulling the spring guide stopper downwards. Now the trigger is somewhat adjustable. If you have a look on the bottom there, you can see there is a screw just there. What you do is you can adjust it slightly for the little bit of slack that it has. I'll show you what I mean. So if you can see, if I'm pulling the trigger now, you can see how much travel there is until it breaks. There, it's probably about 1/2 centimeter there. I'll try and get you a better view. You can see the trigger's moving backwards, and that's where it breaks. Now, if you adjust the trigger here so that the screw goes in completely, you can set it to almost a hair trigger. It's quite dangerous if you do so, but some people like the triggers like that. And you can see I'm just going to touch the trigger and then it breaks. See that? All you do is just tap it, a very light touch, and it goes. Okay, let's readjust this back out so I don't forget. Back out a little bit more so you get slightly more slack. Pull, 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 break. There we go, and that's how I like my triggers. Now let's have a look at the piston and the spring guide rod made by Springer Custom Works. Now you can buy these as a set, or you can buy these separately. We got them together and they were about 70 euros at the time of buying, which is about 80 US dollars. The spring guide is very heavy and seems to be made from a very solid steel. And the piston itself is absolutely beautiful. You can tell by the way they've made these spiral cuts into it. It's just really, it's a piece of artwork in our eyes rather than just your run-of-the-mill piston that does its job, you know. It's always good to make parts that look good as well as function correctly, just so that you can have more pride in your build after you finished it and while you're building it, because you will be servicing these parts over time, and whenever you disassemble your rifle and parts like this come out, you always think, wow, that's amazing, rather than, you know, just a standard looking piston and you just kind of look at it and go, eh. Now, one brilliant feature about this piston is it comes with an air brake and a spare O-ring as well. I believe this O-ring that it comes with is a slightly either thinner or thicker one, just so that you can tailor it to whatever cylinder you're using to make sure you have a good air seal. But the best feature is that it comes with an air brake in there, as you can see in that plastic piece there, a removable air brake. Now, not only is it removable, but you can modify the length of it, so you can cut it down if it's too much, if it's breaking too much, or you can just completely remove it if you don't need it. There's a little hex screw plug there, which will go into the end here just to protect it. And for those of you who want to actually look inside the piston, okay, we're now going to install our trigger unit onto our Action Army receiver and see how she looks. While I've got everything disassembled here, I'm going to lube the trigger. Remember that you don't need to go overly crazy with everything. Just try and get some lube on moving parts so that there's some lubricant keeping any friction or any parts that move against each other nice and smooth and very slippery. If you're wondering, I'm using just an unbranded molybdenum disulfide, and I'll be applying with some very cheap Q-tips. And that's the trigger installed on an Action Army receiver. If you guys are wondering how to install the safety, I'll quickly show you now. You take your original safety lever, put it over there just like that, and then place the brass spacer that comes with it on top of it. Thirdly, you put the spring on top of that, and then you install this screw here, the one with the washer type base there. So this is what the safety lever should look like when it's installed on yours. You just put it over there, make sure the holes line up, make sure that little notch is in this little notch here. The spring goes over here like that. As I said before, you might need to cut that down just a little bit so it's not so strong. And be sure you don't try and use the original Tokyo Marui screw that comes with your original trigger. You want to use the screw that comes with the S trigger. That just goes on there like that, and you screw that in. I'm not actually going to be using my safety lever on this. On second thoughts, I'm going to lock that plate to the rear so that it can still fire, and I'm not going to be using that. I am slightly worried that I may catch my thumb on that as I have a low scope, or I may be using a low scope on this, so I'm going to leave that out now. All I did was move this plate to the rear and tighten those two screws down there so the plate does not move. So we just done a little bit of testing and we installed inside an Action Army Teflon coated cylinder, a PDI 520 spring, along with the spring guide and the piston. And we got to tell you guys that unfortunately with a PDI spring, the piston does not lock back, unfortunately, with this setup. We believe it might be to do with the length of the spring and the sheer fatness of the spring. As those of you who know, the PDI fat springs are wider and slightly larger in size, which is very unfortunate because those are quoted as the better springs out there on the market. They're very expensive, but it was something that we wanted to try. So what we've done now is kept the setup exactly the same, spring guide and piston inside this Teflon cylinder, but now we've installed an Action Army spring and it seems to be working perfectly. We'll do a really quick compression test so you guys can see. There we go. And again. There we go. Seems to be working brilliantly. And that's with almost no lube as well. The cylinder is almost dry on the outside, the cylinder wall on the inside is almost dry, and the piston is hardly lubed. We literally just added one drop of silicone around the O-rings just to see how it would perform, and the size seems to be perfect for the Action Army cylinder. One last thing I want to talk about is the Springer Custom Works customer service, which was, for us, absolutely brilliant. If you go to the Springer Custom Works website, they have an instant messenger system which they monitor quite closely. We sent them an instant message on that system and they got back to us within minutes and told us, what is it you want? We said, we need these parts in the next couple of days, next few days. What can you do for us? And he said he'll check with the post office really quickly. He must have made a phone call or something, and then we got a reply back within 10 minutes and they said they can ship it tomorrow morning first thing and we should get it the day after that. That's the quickest they can do it. We said thank you very much, brilliant, go ahead. We paid them and they went ahead and we did. We got them these parts the day after. It was really good customer service and that's just brilliant. One of the worst things I hate in this industry is when you contact a company and you can be waiting nearly 10 days before you get an answer. That's one of the extreme cases that we had, but this company is brilliant. They seem to look after their customers. They make brilliant parts. I mean, as we said, this is an absolute work of art in comparison to some of the other triggers we got. I mean, not that the other triggers are horrible looking by any means. It's just they're good, they serve a purpose and they do their job. They're very robust. These are serviceable, but the S trigger is just on another level. You can just tell that from design to the materials that they select, all the way to the way they put it together. It is something a creator takes pride in. The parts they choose are absolutely amazing. I mean, you could almost say it's over-engineered for what it needs to do, for what it is. Do you really need that trigger system? I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it's over-engineered. Maybe the materials they use, they're a little overkill. Sometimes we like to do it like that. Sometimes that is the way we really enjoy to do things. It's like, if I have a certain grade of steel for this part, then that'll be fine. It should be okay. Or if I go a couple of steps up, a couple of grades up, the steel is amazingly robust, will never break, absolutely never wear out, and it will just last beyond, you know, the service of the rifle or the replica. So that's sometimes how we like to do it, and this is what this is. This is that piece. It's made by someone that is really, really obsessed with quality, longevity, design, and awesomeness. Brilliant stuff, Springer Custom Works. We really enjoy your work, and thank you very much for your service. Okay, guys, that's it for this episode. I guess I'll see you next time. Stay tuned. Have fun.